Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to Carlos Segura. He's prepared some questions to test my resolve, to test my ability to think on my feet. None of this has been prepared, so I have no idea what to expect, except for to expect the unexpected. The legend himself is going to lead this conversation. We'll go where we go. That's it.
Let's start with this. Who do you think you are, and who do you think you're perceived as?
This is one about self-awareness, right?
It could, well, it's not just self-awareness, it's partly that, but also we often think of ourselves differently than how we are thought of.
Oh,
It just happened to me 2 minutes before I called you, by the way, which I'm a little tense, but as a
we're both
byproduct
tense
of
for
our
different
previous
reasons.
podcast, by the way. But let's get back to the question. So,
Okay.
who do you think you are, and who do you think people think you are?
I'm a little scared just because like I could feel my mom ask me that question, like, who do you think you are?
By the
Okay.
way, that's not the tone that the question is intended to
Right.
have.
It started as how are you, and now it's who do you think you are? I think I'm a design snob. I think I'm very direct and sometimes can come across as being, for some people, cantankerous, acerbic, rude, short. But it really comes from a place of caring and not wanting to mince words. I have a great appreciation for those that can speak their mind clearly with an economy of words, and I aspire to do the same. I made a
Okay.
decision to move away from being a very emotional person, which is the first half of my life, towards being a much more logical person, maybe like to practice stoicism. And I am the byproduct of two very different types of people. My dad and his entire family, all my uncles and aunts on that side, they're engineers, they're practical, they're pragmatic, they're very logical. And then my mom's side of the family, with all my aunts and uncles on that side of the family, they're artists, poets, musicians, photographers, they're dreamers. They seem to be more free spirited and happy with their lives, except for they don't have the material data that backs up their happiness. And so I think I'm exactly in the middle of these two people where I'm a creative person, but I'm also very analytical. I can be very business minded, but also be creative and free flowing. I think that's who I am.
Okay, I'm surprised at some of the things that you described yourself, some of the words. I don't think that I don't see you that way. But now let's move on to the second part. How do you think people perceive you? Or do you think people perceive you as you see yourself?
That question is really complex to unpack. I'll do my best. People who catch 1 minute of me will have a very different reaction to people who spend, say, a couple hours with me. And I have anecdotal stories to share with you where someone would literally march up to me when I was in a crowd of people, and I knew that there was going to be trouble. Carlos, you and I, we've seen this look before. Like they're making a beeline towards you, a man walking towards me. I'm like, I can see him. I can see him, even though I'm talking to these people. We're going to have trouble. And he goes, Chris, I'm the person who tweeted this not so nice thing at you on Twitter. I'm like, okay, which one? Because there's so many of them, right? Let's figure out which one you are. And then I quickly figure it out because he gives me enough context. And he starts to ask me some questions. And he said, here's why I asked you this question. How do you want to respond? So he took a very accusational tone with me. And it was not like, let's have a polite discussion about this. It's like,
Right.
I want to prove that I'm right and you're wrong. And we talked. We talked for 5 or 10 minutes. And his whole energy changed immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Because in his mind, I was this person who was like going to fight him on everything and be unreasonable. I'm not that person. And he did the most amazing thing, which is very rare. Days after meeting, he wrote a blog post and he says, I thought Chris was an a-hole. Turns out I'm the a-hole.
That's a good one.
Right? That is a really good one.
That is a really good one. And, frankly, in some ways, it's your discovery of me during our last podcast. I think you thought I was going to be different.
I think we all tell ourselves stories about way too little information and we fill in the gaps. We're always doing this. And so if someone sees one interaction with me and talking to someone, they're going to have a completely different perception than someone who spends any amount of time with me. And I'd like to think that I think I'm semi charming. I can win people over. So when they come in with the aggression, I can usually diffuse and have a chat, and then hopefully we're not going to be best friends later, but at least there's more nuance to this. So was that answer okay?
Yeah, no, it was good. Do you think that judgment often comes from the person seeing you as opposed to yourself? Because I mean, I think maybe we bring a lot to the table with our own experiences and preconditions or whatever,
I think so.
and then you're there to cleanse it, right?
Yeah, I think oftentimes when people, and it works on both ends of the spectrum, the emotional spectrum, like when people shower you with affection or want to throw a lot of hate at you, it's really like a mirror. It's a reflection on who they are and where they've been. So if I say something, I could not have said enough to aggravate or insult you enough for you to respond this way. I think what is happening is I'm opening up a wound that hasn't fully healed from your childhood, unresolved trauma, whatever, and you couldn't respond and protect yourself in that time, but now you're an adult and you will protect yourself. So oftentimes people were responding not to what they saw or heard, but more often as a way to kind of remedy an old problem. And I feel that a lot.
That is an absolutely perfect answer, and I think just on point. Really, really good.
Thank you. So we'll still keep it in Helvetica then.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're not going to Times Roman anytime soon.
Carlos, I have a question for you.
Go.
You said the minutes before something kind of threw you off. Can you share with me?
I can. I have, and this is exactly what you just outlined. I have a friend who I described in our last podcast with the most love possible, and he just called me and was rather hurt and possibly even offended by it. And it didn't come that way from my heart, but uh, because I do care for him a lot. And I was really in shock when he called me a few minutes ago. But
How did it end?
well, he had to go in a meeting, so I don't know. But
Oh no.
he was vocal about it. Not
How
my
does that
intent,
make
of
you feel?
course.
Mm-hmm.
It made me feel very sad. In fact, I'm a little
Yeah.
sad right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I can't control. I think it touches on the answer that you gave me a little while ago. Is that maybe he's bringing something to the table that obviously was not my intent, but he's
Right.
feeling something that who knows? I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah. I feel what you're saying because when our intention is other than what how it's perceived, those are the ones that hurt us the most.
Absolutely. Yeah, really true.
When I'm angry, when I'm deliberately trying to dismiss someone or disrespect someone and they're angry, I'm like, yeah, that was the intention.
Hmm.
But when I'm coming from a positive place and it's received the opposite, that really will mess me up.
It really messed me up.
Yeah,
It really did.
I can see that.
Yeah. All right, let me go to the next question. This is a little bit fun, but let's see. Is there something you would like to know that you are absolutely positive you will never know? Without question, there's nothing in humanity that would fix this curiosity stream that you have.
Ooh, that's a hard one, Carlos. That was supposed to be the fun one. I'm nervous for the ones that are supposed to be hard. Is there anything I want to know that there's no way I could possibly know?
You couldn't possibly know it. It's literally impossible.
This is a question that I've never had to answer before, so let's see how this goes.
We can come back to it if you want time to think about it.
No, I think I have an answer, and if it's not good, we'll come back. Both my grandfathers passed away before I was aware. On both sides, my mom and my dad. And so I've had two loving, amazing grandmothers, totally different energy, but I would have liked to have known them because I think it's part of your story and your father's story, your mom's story that I just have missed out on. I'm grateful that both my grandmothers lived into a pretty old age. They passed away like 10 years ago, but they were in their 90s. So I think that's a full life. But both my grandfathers, I don't know them from anything except for a photograph. Yeah, that's all I got. So I would have really liked to just, you know, the things that grandparents do. They take you for a walk. They tell you about life, and there's something in old people's wisdom that I think is lost.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, that's a good answer. Were you born in the US or did you come?
I was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and I came to the US in 1975 after the fall of Saigon.
Okay, so this question is close to what happened to me too, I guess. So, what are three influential or transformative things that happened to you when you first came to the U.S.? It does. They don't even
Okay.
have to be serious. Like I have an answer to this that it's kind of funny, but
I think because I was 3 years old when I came to the United States, I had no recollection of my home country and what it was like. And so here's the funny thing, and this is not meaningful. It's just funny. I remember watching TV, and I was watching Gilligan's Island, you know, shipwreck black and white TV show,
hmm
and they were able to make modern technology with bamboo and fulcrums and gears and things like that. I remember watching it on TV, and I said, "Dad, is that like how Vietnam was?" And he just looked at me, "You stupid, stupid boy." Because my perception was we lived in villages and huts with really primitive tools and technology. He goes, "No, we lived in a city." And I just remember like, "Oh, that's so weird, this perception. Like I have no memory, and I've lost a part of my history.
so
I can
you
only see."
obviously asked them that much after three.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the spirit of your youthful observation, I'm going to answer this one too because it's
Okay.
close to what you. So when we first came from Cuba, we went to Mexico first. I'll make this very very short, and then we came to the United States. And when we were there, the first thing that someone gave me was Coke, and I spit it out because it had bubbles. I
Mm.
never had Coke before. And then the next thing, another family member gave me chiclets, which were the gum at the time, and I swallowed it because I never had gum before. And then on the way home, I saw this amazing Sunoco oil station gas sign, with a big red arrow going through. And it was one of those revolving signs. And I remember the feeling I had at the time. Of course, I didn't make anything of it at the time because I was 8.5 years old. But I remember it triggering something inside me. And I tell you to this day that I feel like that was my awakening for the attachment of graphics. So those are three things that I still remember today.
Wow. It's interesting when you come from a place, from another place where the culture is different and everyone looks and sounds like you, and there's a shared experience. Then you come to America, how different it can be. And that story's also depending on where you land in the United States, right? So different
Absolutely.
cultures and people don't understand this when we say culture shock. It's a real thing.
Oh, no question, man.
Yeah. And your gum story reminded me of something. When I think I was like 5 years old, maybe six. Um, I was always told up until this point, never swallow gum,
Me too.
never swallow gum, because it
hmm
tastes as a child like it's delicious. There's so many flavors. You want to swallow it, and so I asked my uncle one day, "Why can't we swallow it?" He says, "Just don't swallow it." But what will happen? You will die. I'm like, okay, do not swallow gum. And so I'm living at my grandmother's house before my parents moved from Kansas City, Missouri to San Jose, and I'm chewing this gum, I'm laughing, I'm talking, and then I swallow the gum. And I thought, Carlos, I was gonna die. It was it. I didn't know what to do.
Oh my
And it
God.
was kind of like a guilty shame, like, oh my God, I'm gonna die because I'm an idiot. And how am I going to handle this? So my mom wasn't there yet. So she had called, and my aunt's like, "Hey, your mom's on the phone." I'm like, "Great, I'll run over." And the whole time I'm like, my eyes are like welling up with tears, and I'm talking to my mom. Obviously, it's like I'm thinking to myself, this is the last time I'm gonna talk to my mom. And I was telling her I love you, but I didn't tell her I swallowed the gum. And just the whole time, like as a 5, 6 year old, you're thinking about um, like you're passing, and what are you going to say? What are your last words? And so I went through this crazy thing, and then I asked some other person, adult in the house, and like, oh, don't swallow gum, honey. It'll be okay, but just don't do it. And then I was just relieved and overjoyed that I get to see tomorrow.
Were you trying to spare your mother with bad news, or were you afraid to tell her that you had violated the rule?
I think both. And
Hmm.
I just like, well, if your fate is inevitable, why waste it on words like that? I
Hmm.
just told her I love her, and I asked her what she's doing, and just, but in my back of my mind, I'm just thinking, this is it. This is the last conversation I'm gonna have with my mom.
Okay, let me ask you this. What change has happened in your life that you wish hadn't?
So these are like potential things that are like regretful.
If any of these things are too personal, we can move on.
No, I mean, I like that you're asking these kind of questions.
Because every human being on this planet goes through this,
Yeah.
you know?
Just to give me some time, let me ask you
Yeah.
that question back.
I wish I had spent more time with my mother. I, as you know, my last discussion, they sacrificed absolutely everything so I could have a better life. And then I went off and had a better life and I forgot about them.
Yeah.
And then 25 years went by. I mean, I would call them every once in a while and maybe come see them once every 3, 5 years. I don't know. Not even that, to be honest with you. But I honestly, if I'm being completely honest with myself, I kind of just lived the life they wanted me to live. And then by the time I got back, my dad was dying, and then my mom died later of pancreatic cancer. And it was just, God damn, you know?
Sometimes, like, I think about this as a parent. I want my children to be happy.
Hmm.
And I think it's like, I read this great article. Um, it's written by Scott Burns about how his dad, who had been separated from his mom, needed, is it a kidney? Can you give up a kidney
Yeah,
or,
I think so.
yeah.
I don't know.
So he needed a kidney and they couldn't find him when he needed one to live. And his dad in the hospital bed had said to him, don't feel like you need to, but if you want to, I could use your support here. And he thought about it. He walked outside and he told his mom about it, who, because they were separated, it was like, your dad should have never asked you that question. And there's a line in this article that he wrote about that I just will never forget. And he said something like, the genetic river flows one direction. It doesn't go
Hmm.
back. There's two things that he was thinking about. He was kind of guilted into this idea of giving his kidney, and it might be rejected. It might not make any difference, and he'd be down one kidney. And then he
Hmm.
made the decision to go ahead and do it. And so I think about that a lot, the responsibility of parents and what they want for their children. And I want my children to be happy. They can be exactly who they are, what they want to do, and I don't expect anything back. So when your parents sacrifice so much for you to have that dream and you live that dream, could that just have been what they wanted?
I don't doubt for a second that it's what they wanted. My real struggle is from me. Like, why didn't I reach out? I remember one day I was talking to my father and I felt the desperation in his voice when he simply said, "Can you just call me once a week?"
Mm.
And that really hurt me.
What happened after that?
Well, as usual, I did call him once a week for a couple of months and then it just went back to the normal.
Mm.
And I hate to say this, man, but I found myself not having anything to talk about with him.
Yeah.
It was really hard because I would call, and the reason I didn't continue calling every week is because there were just these awkward moments of silence that just we were just lived in completely different solar systems. And trust me, man, he loved me and I loved him. There was no, but it was just a weird thing to have a conversation over the phone. It's different when you're face to face and you have a beer and blah 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 and you see facial expressions and blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. But on the phone, it's like awkward silences.
I wonder though if it's, I think women tend to have the ability to talk about little things, big things, and it's very natural. I don't know if it's cultural this way or just the way things are set up or not, but I have the same problem. My mom and I, we can talk about lots of stuff because she'll ask me all kinds of questions, big and small. Are you eating enough? This and that. What's going on with that? She seems genuinely interested in the most mundane things. Whereas with my dad, it's like we don't have those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And it would be weird if we did because it would be like, this is not the relationship we've set up. So when I'm talking, it's very brief with my dad, and he lives near me, and we just went to see him yesterday, both my parents, and it's just maybe men need to learn something here about how to have those kinds of conversations.
Well, I think it's genetic. In fact, I don't know if you know of Jordan Peterson, but he has a great quote of which I cannot remember right now. But he talks about the things that women tend to be attracted to and men tend to be attracted to. And one of the things that women like, because they're more emotional, as you just spoke of, is being nurses and stuff like that, and moms, and because they're just more, you know, expressive in the caring department than men.
I wonder if it's like we're socialized differently. Like if we go back to ancient times, like when there's a small tribe of us, like literally like 20 people or something, uh, the most physically capable had to go out and procure food and to defend against threats like a bear or a lion or an invading tribe. And then everyone else who was not physically capable were going to build social skills to be able to make sure that if something were to happen, that the others felt enough of a bond and connection with them that they would protect them and provide for them.
I actually think that our behavior is deeper than activity based, as you
Hmm.
described. I think
Hmm.
it's uh, cell based. I mean, and
Mm.
the best example I can give you is how birds behave when they're doing their mating dance. There's nothing other than cellular, you know, originality there that makes them do what
Hmm.
they do, and that's
Mm.
just the way it is. So,
Yeah.
so let me ask you this: what influence or people can you point to in your life that made a difference?
Oh, okay.
And
This
let me
one's
ask you, and let me refine that by saying other than
mhm.
your parents, because I suspect it might be your parents.
Mm. Um, I have a tremendous amount of appreciation for anyone who's ever done anything for me in my life. Those
Mhm.
moments and those people are recorded very vividly in my mind. So this one is pretty easy for me to answer. So excluding my parents, uh, can I talk about my family other than my
Absolutely.
parents? Okay.
Hmm.
Um, one of those people is my older brother. He's 4 years older than me. His name is Arthur, and we he's basically like a surrogate father to me because my dad is working. My dad doesn't understand the culture of America. So my older brother becomes this guy who's looking out for me. And he saw things in me that I didn't know of myself. Like when I was in high school, I was in metal shop and he would see these sculptures I would make and he's like, have you ever thought about doing something with that? I'm like, this old junk? He goes, yeah, not a lot of people can do that. He got me my first credit card. He helped me to find my first freelance client, and he flew me to an animation festival because he thought I might be interested. And it was one of the first times I flew as a teenager because we didn't fly anywhere. So he flew me down to San Diego. I was like, this is an experience, and this is my brother. He's only 4 years older than me. So he opened a
Hmm.
lot of doors, and still to this day we're pretty close because we can talk about pretty deep things.
Hmm.
And I had that connection. There's a bunch of teachers in my life, teachers from junior high all the way through high school and college that showed me some kindness and they bent the rules a little bit for me, which to me at that age was like everything, just everything. I'll give you two examples. One was Mr. Thompson, Mr. Ted Thompson in social studies at John Steinbeck Middle School. He had that the haircut from like my father's knows best, old
Yeah.
school sweater vest, very proper guy, a kind of man out of time thing. And I would doodle, I would draw on my notepad all the time. And then I remember Heather, who sat to my right, beautiful woman, beautiful girl. She's like, "How come he can draw and I can't in class?" And he stopped. I'm like, "Shoot, why would you do that to me?" Things were cool. He goes, "Here's the thing. He can listen and draw and you cannot." So I wasn't in trouble. this is fantastic. So just these little gestures, I will remember. And Mrs. Karen Newyar from English class, English lit in high school, she told everyone basically, if you don't bring your notebook, your textbook, you're going to be docked points. You cannot get an A in this class if you do not bring your textbook. Back then, I was taking the bus. I have a backpack full of books. I don't want to bring this textbook with me every day. And she always had one or two spare books that she would loan, and she would always gently slide it over to me so I wouldn't get in trouble, and everyone else got in trouble. And so again, it was just like,
That's amazing. It's also amazing that you were able to recognize that gesture.
well, as a kid, I mean, anybody shows you any kindness, I think, especially in this really awkward place where we're trying to figure out who we are, those things matter a lot, especially
You
because I
think
felt like I
kids
never fit
recognize
in.
that?
Well, no, you probably, I don't know, but I always felt like a stranger and an outcast in society, and so anyone who'd show me some kindness, I
Mhm.
remembered.
Well, yeah, I guess I can connect with that too. What is your measure of success?
Freedom, 100% freedom.
That's exactly my answer.
No riches, no nothing in the world will matter if you can't choose what you want to do with whom you want to do it with, and for how long. So I work towards having freedom, and luckily, the reason why I'm most of the times very happy and optimistic and filled with joy is because I have a lot of choices.
Yes, and I'll only add because my single word answer to that question was the same. You also have to have the recognition, as they say, that freedom isn't free, and you really do have to fight for that freedom or work hard
Absolutely.
for it, I guess I should say.
Hmm.
So, what drove you to change your career path, and why do you think it's important?
Are we talking about from working with clients to being an educator?
So, what I was going to ask you related to this is for you to
Hmm.
give me a better scope of the business you had and why you left.
Okay.
And from what I gather, you had a pretty good thing going. So, like, what
Yeah.
was the situation that made you change your career path? I guess those two questions are connected.
Hmm. So we made commercials and music videos, and we were paid, relatively speaking, a lot of money to do those things. And the longer you do something, the better you're at it, and the easier it is for you to procure clients and have them trust you. Much more difficult when you're young. So why would we walk away? A couple different things were happening, and I like to think I can fly above what it is I'm doing and kind of see what's happening on the larger cultural landscape. And we see that people are no longer tied to cable and television. People are streaming, and the young people that work for me, they're all based on subscription services, so they don't watch commercials at all. And so I can see the tide shifting if our career is in building and making commercials, as the demand for commercials is going down and other things are capturing the advertising dollars, if you will. We're probably not going to be able to continue to do this for at the level in which we want to do it for that much longer. I could see that in the jobs that our reps would bring us, they're less creative and they're more demanding, and the budgets were lower. And so I'm like the canary in the coal mine where I can sense change happening much quicker than most people. And I like to think it's because I'm less attached to what it is I'm doing. And so I can feel that. And so I'm having conversations with our reps, with my executive producer, and saying, I think we need to build a new ship. This ship is not going to keep going this way. And I think they thought I was alarmist. Like, I don't think so, guys. The writing's on the wall. You're just not willing to read it. It's right there. I can see it. And so I started to shift away from doing commercial advertising work to doing branding and brand design. And that was really cool because that was very rewarding. I'm not concerned that that's going away because that's going to be around. But then I just thought that I think I exchanged one master for another master. I'm still working for the master. I'm still, just a slave to client work. And it's in this moment when you can feel like your needs are met financially and creatively that you can explore other things. So that's when I started to explore the education side, and it filled my heart, my soul up so much that I was like, this has got to be my calling in life. I didn't have a business model yet, but I was going to figure it out.
What was the trigger? What made you I mean, that's a pretty big change.
The trigger is I had been teaching for, I think at that time, almost 15 years at Art Center and at Otis. And I get so much fulfillment from doing this. But we all know teachers don't get paid anything. And so it was a labor of love. And I just really enjoyed teaching the handful of students that I had. And it really just, if you want something that's life affirming, you just try and help people. And teaching is one form of helping people. And so when these young students from all over the world, when we sat together and I could see that, oh, they're on the verge of having a breakthrough, a creative breakthrough, that lit me up like you can't believe. I'll go home and I'll read 3 more books to come back to teach you more theories or looking at the problem from a different angle. I'm really motivated. But, and then I look at how much am I being paid relative to the amount of time I'm putting into this? This is upside down. How can I teach, get that fulfillment, help other people have these transformative moments, but do it in a way that I don't have to go and work another job, which is servicing clients. And so that was the beginning, and just searching for a business model where I could do that. And then ultimately that led us where we are here today.
So how are you able to juggle all the things that I suspect you do
In that transition or now,
now?
I have a wonderful team. I delegate almost everything. And so I get to do the things I love the most. Back to the freedom thing. So I don't like dealing with contracts. Someone deals with the contracts. I don't want to deal with the negotiations. I have a different person doing that. I don't even want to talk to the team necessarily. I just want to talk to one person and for that person then to manage the team. And so I put in place people to do every single thing that that it doesn't have to be done by me.
Mhm.
So I get time to talk to people like you. I get to read books from friends like ours, like Jason Fried, and that's what I get to do. And everything else, somebody else takes care of.
Can you say how big your team is?
Yes, we're 18 people right now.
Wow, that's pretty healthy number.
Yeah, and looking to hire probably 4 more people soon.
Okay, well then, so I'm gonna jump to the conclusion that things are going well for you.
Yes, things are going really well. And so this year or last year, we did $4.5 million in revenue, and it's very profitable business now. Now that we took care of a couple of problems, um, and it'll continue to grow. And I'll tell you this, Carlos, for the 20 plus years that I ran Blind as a service design company, only one person ever talked to us about investing or buying us. And running the future as an education company, oddly, I have venture capitalists reaching out to me. Do you need money? Do you need money? It's like, where were you when I was struggling? This is kind of interesting.
Mhm.
So the market is telling you something that in high growth markets or industries, people are looking. Like
Mhm.
quite literally, right before our call, got off the phone with a venture capital firm.
Wow. That's definitely something to be proud of. I mean, it must make you feel like you've made the right call on a variety of
Yeah,
levels.
yeah. Well, the level of fulfillment I have is, if before on a scale of 1 to 100, from a creative point of view, it was very fulfilling to do. But on a spiritual kind of like, am I making a difference in the world? It was pretty low. And
Mm-hmm.
even times on the creative level, it's like, okay, so they want to make these changes. All right, let's just go make them, right?
Yeah.
I'm tired of fighting them. So we do it. But now I'm so fulfilled. And the funny thing is, and I believe this very much, if something gives you joy, you're passionate about it, and you put in the time to practice and hone your craft, the kind of money that you can make, it will eventually catch up to that passion.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to stay in it to figure out the business model, to position yourself in the proper way. But eventually it will catch up. And I think we're starting to catch that wave because there was a lot of paddling out to the wave, and now we're riding that wave, and
Mm-hmm.
it feels great.
Yeah. What's the first and last thing you do every day? And other than the obvious brush your teeth, put on your pants kind of stuff.
I read messages on social media, first thing and last thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because people are like, oh my god, okay, what kind of society have we turned into? But I just want to clarify one thing for anyone who might be watching or listening to this is that my business is understanding customer sentiment. And I used to hear things about like Mark Cuban and other people who was like, no, I'm literally at up to 3 in the morning reading what it is because he is invested in his community, his customers, his audience, as am I. So when I read the comments that are coming in from whatever platforms, and there are many for me to check, I get a general feeling because I have to keep my finger on the pulse. Like, this is where they're shifting. They're not happy about this. There's questions about this, and we have not adequately addressed that. So this is what we're doing. So I used to look at analytics before we had an audience, and so I was studying the analytics as a tea leaves of what the customer consumer sentiment is. But now I'm reading their comments. And so these are from strangers, from friends, from people in my community outside, and I build a composite of their sentiment, and I try to steer the company so that we give and create more joy in the world, and we try to diminish the other stuff that's not good.
I agree with that too. I think there's a lot of learning. Sometimes the learning isn't what you, well, often it's actually not what you
Right.
think it was going to be. Tell me a few things that you think our industry does wrong.
What I want to just define industry first. Which industry are you referring to?
Well, I'll give you a big umbrella by saying creative, but more specifically, ad agencies, design firms,
Yeah.
just communicators.
I think there's a lot of things. So I'll hit high and low on this. Um, I think creative people generally are not very good at being self-directed. They're other directed. And so we look at ad agencies, and I wonder this a lot. Like, how come there's so few ad agencies who are really good at branding, at marketing, messaging, finding customer? Why don't they just create their own products? Why don't they become their own clients? Why doesn't Wyden and Kennedy have their own shoe line? I don't understand that myself. They've been really good at building a multi-billion dollar business for Phil Knight. Why didn't they do it for themselves? And so these are kinds of things I think about. And then unfortunately, that ripples all the way down from the big agencies that doing, the big global agencies, all the way down to the solo practitioner in their studio. They're waiting for someone to find a problem and give it to them for them to solve. And Brian Collins talks about this. Like, we have to shift away from this mindset of being problem solvers to problem seekers. Like, we have to go find a problem, scratch our own itch. And then when we find that problem, why aren't we the ones who benefit from the recognition of the problem and the creation of the solution?
Can I dive into that answer a little bit? Because you're kind of triggering some questions that I hadn't written down. One is it possible that part of the answer is that, and this touches on another question that I was going to ask you, is what do you think about award shows, which we'll go into later, which touches on my concern here, which is I think that some of this stuff is, or gels, i.e., works because of budget, not because of creative. And so I think that a lot of creative people just create. We have no way of guaranteeing anything or assuring anybody that whether it's going to work or it's not going to work. And of course, the more money you throw at something, sometimes it works because of the money and the support. But I think that maybe that's why creators don't do their own thing, because they know that you can't just have a good idea. You have to have a good idea with a lot of backup.
Right.
So, and by backup, I mean money.
And knowledge and experience and marketing know-how and business acumen.
But that's a really good question that I'd never thought about is since we are so good at marketing, why aren't we marketing ourselves? And the other thing too is I have found that where almost every magazine, of course there are exceptions to every rule, but almost every magazine in our sector is poorly designed.
Well, I recently resubscribed to Wired magazine because I remember sharing concepts that I read in Wired years ago and to this day. So I'm like, I'll support Wired magazine. So my first issue came back in the mail and I opened it up. And it's as thin as I've ever seen a magazine.
Hmm.
Almost all the advertising out from it.
Mm.
So if you are in the space of creating periodical uh, stories, interests, research, whatever, white paper, it's a weird business to be in.
Hmm.
All the ad dollars are gone, and I'm missing that, to be honest, because I liked seeing ads that were targeted towards common interests. I wanted to learn about those companies.
Hmm. Yeah, there was a time when I used to buy magazines as my school books, basically. Mostly fashion magazines, but
Yeah,
have you ever abandoned a project or a client?
several.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think we call it the clinical term is we resigned a client.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Can you
And
tell me
it's
of a story of one that's gone horribly wrong?
I can tell you a couple, but I'll
You don't
focus
have to
on
name a client, but maybe just the general story.
yeah. Um, there's a couple, but I'll pick the one that comes to my mind first, and we'll see where you want to go with this. But um, there was a director producer in Santa Monica who were starting a new production company. Okay, cool. They had heard things about us. Great. They need an identity system designed for them. Okay, we can do this. No problem. And so we meet with everyone. We talk about what they want, whatever. So they go away, and we do a bunch of ideas. This was back when like I'd made a lot of ideas because I just like making stuff. And so we get together with the client. We lay out all our initial logo concepts for them, and they're like, "Wow, this is a lot." And they literally applauded, which doesn't happen very often. I'm like, "Cool." They're like, you've given us a lot to think about." We kind of pared it down to a couple that they might go with. And then a couple days later, um, one of the partners in this 3-person operation said, "Can we meet?" I'm like, "Sure, sure, let's meet." Came in, it's like, so and Carlos, you're gonna know where the story goes. So I showed my wife and my daughter.
Oh my God. I have the same story. Keep going.
Okay. So I showed my wife and daughter. I'm like, okay. And you know what? I've been thinking about it. Do you have other ideas? I'm like, uh, other than the gazillion we showed you? I mean, I think we need to pare things down at this point. He goes, well, just to be honest with you, I'm kind of underwhelmed. And I said to him, how do we go from applause to underwhelmed? He goes, could you just humor me and like explore more ideas? And I said, you know what? I got a different proposal for you. Why don't we just return your initial payment on this? We part ways and you do whatever you think you need to do. And oftentimes they're like thrown back. They're not used to people saying, take your money back, and luckily freedom. You have enough money that you can just turn work away. And I know by saying what it is that I said that I'll never work with that person or anyone that's connected with them ever again, because that's kind of a burn the bridge moment. I'm totally professional. I just say to them, I just don't think we're the right company for you. I can understand if you were disappointed and then you're underwhelmed. I totally get that. But to go from one spectrum to the other, we're not the right company for you. So yeah, I've now learned in my life that if you make the poor decisions to take on a client that you then quickly realize this was the bad decision, cut your losses, get out. No
Did
amount
you
of
know
money is
this was
worth
a
it.
bad client from the beginning?
I did not, because two of the other partners were really cool people who knew of our work. But this was the suit, if you will, and
Yeah.
the suit was making the decisions. So I'm like, all right,
Can I share my version?
please.
I don't want to take away from your spotlight, but this is very similar with a
Yeah.
different outcome, however.
Okay.
It was a branding project. It was for a company in California. I'm not even going to tell you what kind of company because that would reveal it was a pretty big
Yeah.
company. And we did this branding project. It was fantastic. We showed several ideas. They were just so blown away, I just couldn't even believe it. This was a Friday. I'm sorry, a Thursday. They were just blown away. Fantastic. You guys walk on water, blah, blah, blah. Friday, they called and they completely shifted, just like as you just outlined, exactly the same thing. It was, we're not sure. We think that we want to explore some other things. Here's a logo that our secretary did. And he sends it to me by email, and it had a big swoosh, like that big circle, like the whirlpool,
Yep.
And ironically, at the time, I had been working on a study of logos that had swooshes, and I had literally almost 5,000 logos on a board that had a swoosh. So I wrote them this very, very respectful, professional letter. basically outline exactly what you just said in a nutshell. Sometimes people aren't meant to be together. You're an amazing person. I'm an amazing person. But sometimes we just don't click. And maybe this is one of those times. That said, what I did is I put the logo that her secretary did on this 5,000 logo chart. And I emailed them back and I said, I'll give you $500 if you can pick your logo out of this collection. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't find their own logo. So I told them I respectfully request that you think about this again. You're going to be throwing your money away if you go this way. If you want to, that's completely up to you. It's your company and I respect it. But I can't continue with you if you go this route. The only difference between you and me, though, is that I didn't give our money back. And here's the best part. Monday, they thought about it over the weekend. They called us back and they said, you are absolutely right. And thank you for forcing us to think this through. And I've gotten 4 or 5 other projects from them, and we've done amazing branding for them.
Mm,
And I think for me, the moral of the story here is, as you did, is you have to stand up for what you believe in. If not for your creative, but more for your process. Because there is always the reality that someone will simply not like what you do, even if it's good. I mean, there's just human taste, right?
right.
But as you point out, to go from this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen to I want to see more, mm-mm. That's a sign.
I like the way your story ended better than the way my story ended. So
All right, well, let's.
wait. I don't want to let you off on just yet. So you tell them, I think sometimes things were not meant to be. You show them this thing and I encourage you to think about it. They thought about it. They came back, said, and did he say, Carlos, please, let's continue on with what you were doing.
Yes,
So you
we
finished
actually
it out and everything was
produced.
great.
Yeah, everything was great.
Yeah.
It was one of the most complicated and large branding projects we've done. I mean, we printed so much stuff; it was unbelievable. This
Yeah.
was back in the day when print was,
Yeah.
uh, the thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I have several stories and case histories like that I've actually been considering putting in a book without naming names
Mm,
because they're very, very, very important teaching moments. I
mm-hmm.
still have the letters from everyone.
Do you are you a fan of Fargo?
Absolutely.
The film and the TV series?
Yeah.
Amazing, right? So
Yeah.
they have this thing at the beginning, and I think you'll like this. They said the following are true stories,
Uh-huh.
and then they erased the word true very deliberately, and they're just the following are stories. And it's a cadence, and that's perfect. And it says the names have been changed, but everything else is exactly the way it was as we recall, to protect the innocent, the not so innocent, or whatever.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think you need to release a book under that kind of same thematic vibes.
I have a story that I'll tell you some other time about this teaching experience that I had a few months ago. It will
Yeah.
blow your mind. It blew mine.
Wow.
It will blow your mind.
Okay,
We'll have to
I'm gonna
go
write this down.
offline and do that.
Teaching experience. I think the difference between where you are in that story and where I was this is a small time production company. It really was. You're talking about a much bigger company, I think, and a relationship worth working through. And I think them saying, somebody in our team has an idea, Carlos, would you consider it? It's a little different than us. Maybe not that much. Maybe we're just really just not wanting to hear lip from anybody. It's like, don't go from this to this. That's just too much of a spectrum. It seems like, I don't want to use this word, but like manic or bipolar. It's like, how do you go from like applause to like, this is not good?
Well,
I don't
the
understand that.
other important key point here too, though, Chris, is that how do you go from hiring a design firm of our level and then sending me something that your secretary did? I mean, what? And you're a company that is in the creative field. You should know better. You just simply put.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So we're both close to walking, and then yours said, "No, no, come back to the table."
well, to your point earlier about every wanting to treat clients with respect, I
Yeah.
actually want to do that to every client, but I also expect the same in return, which is the line of my contract. I'll try not to be an ass. You should do the same.
Right.
That's what that speaks to. In fact, that line came from that experience.
You went back to the table like, I need to update our business card and our letters. Yes. Love that.
So, how do you deal with disappointing third-party vendors, or did back then? Because you don't do that anymore, I suspect.
In your industry, what is a third party vendor?
Well, a printer or a
Hmm.
manufacturer of some packaging, or
Right. Someone that works for you. You're the client now.
yeah,
What mood are we in today? Like, how do I, give me some parameters. Like, we're generous.
we're upset right now.
No, we're upset.
We're upset. This is a lot
Okay.
of money.
A lot of money, and they've dropped the ball.
They've dropped the ball. You depended on these guys, and they've dropped the ball.
Okay. So I like to try to deliver um, hard information through steely, cold, unemotional voice, right? My delivery should just be even keeled and tempered, even though the messages can be cutting. Because I think when you start to yell, people just shut down. They'll tell you anything that you need to hear, but you won't work towards a solution.
Okay.
So sometimes you can ask a question. It is a very directed question. It's something like, when we met, we talked about it was going to do X, Y, and Z. Help me understand how what you came up with, what you're doing, honors what we agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just let them do what they do. And then they usually make a bunch of excuses. And you're like, so I'm hearing a lot of reasons, but none of this is getting us closer to the solution here. So I'm in a difficult position. I got to make a choice. The choice right now is cut our losses with you and move to a different party, which I don't want to do, but I'm not exactly confident that if I stay with you, that this can be resolved. So right now I'm looking for assurances from you and your team with the detailed plan as how we're going to right this ship. Otherwise, I'm going to have to make a different decision and then let them talk.
Mm-hmm. My situation, or not my situation. I think that a lot of the situations for you and me in dealing with these problems isn't so much that they've disappointed you. It's that they've usually painted you into a corner, at least for me. And that is that every single time I've been disappointed to that degree that we're talking about now, it's been difficult because I don't have plan B or the option for a
Mm.
plan B, because the deadline is coming up, or the disaster is so costly that, I mean, it's just so difficult, and I've always wondered how people deal with stuff like that.
So okay, that's part of the parameters then, that you can't find another option, right?
Hmm.
You can't fire them and you're hating this thing. Okay, so new tactic then.
Yeah.
And I've had something like this happen. We basically have each other over a barrel. Like, I'm your client, but you've also screwed me over, and I can't find another person. So what we do next is going to determine the kind of relationship we'll have in the future. Maybe you just don't care. So now I get into solutions mode. Like, we're beyond the point of pointing fingers and trying to understand how we got here. Given what we need to get done in the next X days, I need to strategize with you on how to get this back on track as much as possible. And I need some concessions from you and your team to make this work. Otherwise, we've screwed this up in ways that I would not be able to repair. And so I try to come with that. Like, I don't really care if I said this, you said this, if your team there was a car accident. That won't help us. We have to get into what can we both do right now to try to pull this from the jaws of defeat.
Yeah.
And then I probably would never work with them again, but at least right now that's what we got to do.
Well, I can tell you that the source for the question, at least from me, came from 100% of the time not having an option, and it was just so utterly frustrating that I just didn't even know what to do.
Were you able to fix it?
In some cases, no.
Yeah.
In one case, it became a legal problem.
Mm.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what other career do you think would be of interest to you?
Probably architecture.
Oh, that's good.
I love architecture so much. I like design in dimensional space. And I think I remember working with our architect. He was saying this to insult me, but I took it like, oh, when we were designing our first office, and my architects looked at me because I came in with like books, tear sheets, materials. I was ready to go, and he said, "Chris, are you a frustrated architect?" I think that's a dig, but I'm like, "Yeah, I think I am, maybe." And I remember in design class, I always was thinking like, okay, this is what it looks like in the 2D space, but what if it did this for the cover and it wrapped around, trying to think it on a multidimensional level and looking at it in physical space. And I think the if you are a good designer, as Massimo Vignelli had said, if you can design one thing, you can design everything.
I don't believe that, by the way.
You don't? I do.
No, I do not.
Okay. Because I
Absolutely not.
think there's relationships that you understand about form and function and how things work that you can apply it to other things. I'd
You
love
may
to
be
hear your
able to
point of view on
apply
this.
it, but
Yeah.
there's no way that's, in my opinion, that someone who designs a logo can design a building.
I'll go with you on that one. I
Uh,
don't think, yeah.
I've often been asked, why don't you, because I'm a car guy, which was going to be one of my next questions. Are you a
Hmm.
car guy? But people always say you should design your own car. And I go, never. Hey, that's impossible. Are you a car guy?
But I want to circle back. So I think the person who designs a logo is a form maker and a very specific type of form. It's a hyper specialized skill, whether it's calligraphy, hand hand drawn, or built up lettering. But the kind of design, I guess it's autobiographical in that I understand layout and typography. So now we're not just looking at the micro, we're looking at the macro, like how things fit together in a system. And oddly enough, I have designed buildings before and interior spaces and furniture. So like the same relationship I understand between a block of copy, a headline, and the negative space around it, I can apply those if I'm a diligent student of architecture. I'm not saying I don't know anything about it and then all of a sudden I'm going to try and design a building. It's probably a disaster. I'm not saying I can design it better than an architect, but I can design something. So,
Well, I'll give you that. As I mentioned earlier, there are exceptions to the rule, but I think in general, it, for example, the analogy of typography in a building, typography is more of a sensory visual experience. A building is a whole other thing. It's not just making a little pretty drawing of a building.
mhm.
So I don't think that it's a doable thing. But even deeper, since you brought up the typography example, uh, I think that closer to home, I don't know that anyone that designs a logo can go off and do beautiful ancient calligraphy, for example.
Mhm.
And it's a form of typography. It's just a different talent uh, pool for me, but I could be wrong. Who knows?
Mm. Mm. Okay. Yeah.
So, where do you think your wisdom comes from? Because you do have really unique answers to common questions.
Well, first of all, thank you. I don't know who said this, but I believe this. Wisdom is experience plus reflection. It's probably one of the great like philosophers, right? So if
Hmm.
you want to be wise, you must experience things. Very few people can be wise and have experienced nothing. So therefore, there's a correlation. It's not causal between age and life experience, and that's a necessary ingredient. Plus reflection, that's the part where you kind of look back and like, what is the meaning of this? What did I get from it? And so I think being such an awkward, introverted, um, like first generation immigrant, I've had a lot of time to reflect because I wasn't talking to anybody. I was just thinking about what I was thinking about.
Hmm.
And I've described certain experiences to other people and they're like, whoa, that's pretty trippy. I'm like, I just thought that's what everybody does. I often was so self conscious that I started to envision myself from a third party point of view and
Hmm.
float above myself. And I have described a couple times in my life where I was having an outer body experience, and I'm like totally drug free, alcohol free. So I just want to
Hmm.
put that out there,
Yeah, me too.
and I'm just observing, right? So I'm just looking at things, and now I don't have any experience, but I do have an innate skill to reflect and think, and I'm really turned on by philosophy. And so I think it's just that really. And I've had some a very good fortune in my life where I was thrown in a place where living in Los Angeles at the time in which I was living in it, and motion design becoming a thing where I could catch that early first wave of motion designers allowed me to experience a lot of things. And I just think it's a combination of those things. I also want to point out one thing, which is uh, growing up, much like with you, your experience, didn't have a lot of guidance from my parents because they're both working, and
Hmm.
so I was free to be whoever I wanted to be without a lot of voices in my head. And oftentimes, when I talk to people, they're always battling some inner demons. They're living their life because their mom or their dad told them this is the way it's supposed to be, and so they've written up all kinds of rules about how they're supposed to be in life, and so they can't seem to shake those voices. Whereas
Hmm.
I just tell people, and not in a weird way, but like there's usually just one voice in my head. I don't hear my dad's voice. I don't hear my mom's voice. It's just mostly me. And so I'll have that kind of clarity.
I obviously know that the question I asked you is difficult to answer because sometimes there is no answer,
Yeah.
right? But much like a unique singer or magical musician or incredible artist, I think you fall into that space where you have the capability of delivering guidance to normal questions that, and I don't, who knows where that comes from. And I know you say that you don't hear your mom or your dad's in your head, but it's got to be in there,
I'm sure it's in there.
I would imagine.
Yeah. I learned a lot of things from both of them. And I love them both dearly. But it's like, you know how when you ask somebody like why do you not ask the client for more money, or why, or they'll tell you like 55 reasons, and I'm like, whose voice is that? It's not your voice. Like, I don't know, I never thought about it like that. He said, try to trace back like who, and then sure enough, there were reveal like this happened to me when I was 6 years old. This happened to me when I was 12. And so they're carrying that baggage with them, and it's hard for them to see. And that's why it's so hard for them to make decisions.
See, you just did it again. You just did what I described of having an answer to a normal question. I don't
Your
even think
questions are
you
not
realize
normal
that
though,
you do it.
Carlos.
Huh?
Your questions are not normal at all. This is the most I've squirmed in my seat. You've lived up to the billing.
All right, well, let me ask you another one. And this is the
Go
one that
ahead.
told you, I gave you the option to do some research. This is a kind of a fun one. So every brand has a tagline, right?
Yes.
So which tagline that you can recall, and I'll give you the answers to mine because this is tricky.
Okay.
Which tagline um, resonates with you, and which one is the complete opposite of you, of a brand that's out there right now?
Yeah, this one. Okay. You have to go first on this one, Carlos.
Okay, this is just
Yeah.
fun. I
Okay.
love the Reese's peanut butter cup. Their tagline is "Not sorry,"
Mm-hmm.
the way they say it. I
Yeah.
love the Duluth underwear. Get a pair.
I
it's
see a
so,
theme. I see a theme
it's so.
occurring
No, I
here.
have plenty more. I only
Yeah.
outlined two. And the one I don't relate with at all, even though I think it's hilarious and genius, is the TurboTax tagline, which is free, 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 free.
You know what? You can't top that. So I'm just
you,
gonna take the fifth. I can't top this.
you
You've
can't top it.
obviously thought about this. It's probably a quiet obsession hobby of yours,
Well, this is
and
part of my
clearly,
branding study with that Swish logo thing that I was doing.
yeah,
So it's a bit unfair to throw this at you.
yeah,
But
it's a
I'll
good
ask
one.
you this with regard to a brand one. So if you were a car brand, which one do you think you are? And which one do you think you'd like to be?
You asked me briefly if I'm a car guy. Yes and no. I appreciate beautiful sculptures, but when people are like, how many cylinders in that and how many horsepower and 0 to 60, I'm like, dude, I don't know. to me, this is a piece of moving art, and I have
Hmm.
great admiration for the men and women who, on every little thing, the vents to the lights and the turn signal and the way it sounds, right? Those are all things that I love. But I don't sit there and obsess over cars. But I will say, I'm gonna throw this answer out. It's the first time I'm saying this, and it could be something like, "Come on, Chris." So if I was a car brand, I would probably be Porsche, and I'll tell you why. Um, there is a timelessness to something in the shape, from model to model, from year to year, that remains mostly unchanged by my eye. Minor changes here and there. And I think it's something about the quiet confidence that a company can have to say, we did it right. We don't need to do it to be in fashion to change it. We can work on everything else, efficiency, handling, all the other kinds of stuff, longevity, materials, all this kind of. But you know what? We did it right. And it's so iconic and it's held its value. And of all the car brands, I think it's consistently ranked as one of the best drivers' cars, despite cars costing 2, 3, 10x. It's still right up there, always in the top 10. And the Porsches have held their value over the years because of this timeless quality. And so if I could be like a car brand, I would be like Porsche. How'd I do?
You did great. It's actually the same answer that I had, and I struggled for several reasons because it's so. Of course, you want to be Porsche, but that's not the reason I selected it. But I don't want to get into why I selected it, but unless you want me to. But I want to know why, in addition to the answer that you just gave me, why you think that connects with the presence of Christo. Why does what Porsche does represent what Chris does?
Just a couple of days ago, a friend of mine was reading to me my horoscope, which I don't really put a lot of stock into. So she's like, "When were you born? What day? What time? All that kind of stuff." And she was telling me, according to your moon, your ascendant sign. I don't know any of that stuff. She was reading something back to me, which I'm like, well, I guess this is pretty accurate. If the suit fits, crawl into it. One of the things is I have now come to a place in my life where I'm 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 pretty comfortable with who I think I am, and I'm not really willing to apologize for that anymore.
Hmm. Did you ever apologize?
Yeah, I did a lot.
Really?
Really. Yeah. I think when I found design, I started to find myself, and each time I got deeper into it, I found another piece of the puzzle of myself, and was like, I can build my identity here finally, because I wasn't athletic. I didn't play music. I didn't have any kind of special skills. Wasn't tall, wasn't short, wasn't anything, and so it was just kind of like disappearing. And when I found design, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm pretty good at this. Now I get to explore who I am. And in the process of creating videos on YouTube, I'm 42 at that point, right? So I think I know who I am now. And I've spent 20 years making commercials for other people. I don't really not worried too much about money. And so I get to just express who I am. And for a lot of people, they don't like it at all. Totally okay with that. And I remember one time I was getting a little testy and during a live stream when somebody had suggested, I think in a non offensive way, like, Chris, why don't you try this with the logo that you're designing? And I paused. This is a live stream. And I said, well, that's a good idea. When you host a channel, you could do that idea, but this is what
it's,
I'm doing. You know what
it's
I
so
mean? Great
good. It's
idea.
so good. It's so good.
Yeah. You do it. It's so good. You should do it. I'm just going to do it this way. And one last little story here is I'm on Clubhouse doing a call with my friend Petrula von Tigers. And after the call, she texts me. She goes, Chris, there's some strong reactions to you from this room today. I know what that means because Petrula is very polite. It means people are throwing shade on me and they're DMing her, right? And I'm like, okay. She goes, do you want to talk about it? I'm like, yeah, okay. So she tells me some of the things and she's very careful about how to phrase these things. I said, I appreciate that. Petrula, I'm not going to change. She goes, Chris, people misunderstand you. I'm like, no, they understand me perfectly. They get to react however they want to react. And it's just, You know what? People call me a charming razor blade. I'm good with that label. That fits really well.
Have people really called you that, Chris?
Yeah, people give me all kind of loving, just funny nicknames, and I love it all. I really do. And
Mm-hmm.
they
I
they're
got plenty
like,
of nicknames too, and
I told my wife because it was on Twitter, like, Chris, you're the charming razor blade. I told my wife, she goes, the internet knows you, don't they? There's an edge to you. You can get cut, but there's some charm. So you're kind of there's some attraction there. We don't know what it is. And I said to her, to Petrula, that's my brand. And she laughed. She goes, okay, I'm just gonna have to accept that.
yes, that's absolutely right.
I found my voice. I found who I am, and I'm not really willing to apologize for that. Now, if I misspeak, if I offend you, I will apologize, but I'm not going to apologize for being me.
I'm not even sure that you should apologize if you offend someone.
Well, like you know how when you said your thing that your intention was from a good place, and then somebody called you and said they were really hurt by this, and they took it in a totally different way. So for
Yeah.
me, I'm like, I'm sorry that you interpret this. Allow me to explain. But if you want to be mad at me, still, I can't do anything about that.
Well, that's exactly my point, is that
Yeah,
I know where it came from.
yeah,
I can't help what he brings to that.
yeah.
Although, of course, I will have a longer conversation and try and
Hmm.
smooth it out. What's something that you like to do alone?
These days, it seems like everything we're doing is alone, isn't it?
No, I mean for Chris Doe. I mean for yourself. Like
Just for myself.
just for yourself.
Like a guilty indulgence or something.
Yeah.
I love reading comic books. I have a emotional, sentimental connection to comic books that most people will not understand.
What age do you feel someone has to have their shit in the pile?
There's no age, whenever it makes sense. We all run a different timeline.
Is there a place you'd like to live other than where you are?
I ask myself that question a lot, and my wife and I we explore all kinds of options, and the answer always comes back to nope, exactly where we are, because we can live anywhere and do what we do, and the options are there. So until that changes, and I love the weather, I love the people, I love the freedom, I love the energy of the city that we live in, and there it's hard to beat. It's not perfect for sure. What about you, Carlos?
Uh, I am very, very fond of Barcelona.
I've been to Barcelona. It's very nice.
I think it's in my blood, my DNA blood, not just blood. I would like to go there or live there.
What's holding you back?
My roots. I
Mm.
have what I call fortunate problems.
You know what though? Of all the cities that I've traveled to, Barcelona has a pretty good combination of things that I like.
Oh, it's fantastic. Most because my best friend lives there and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, what do you want?
Can you add some context to that?
Big picture, what does Christo want?
I want to change formal education, especially in the undergrad space.
That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
Are you confident you can make it happen?
No, but I like the pursuit.
That's awesome. Great answer.
So, Carlos, between you and me and my mouth to God's ear, it'll be the thing I do till I can't do it anymore.
Have you struggled finding team members that share your vision?
In the beginning, yes. Not so much now. And I have to remind myself from time to time that um, I think people like us, we see things and we move differently, and we have a different appetite for risk. Things that scare people don't scare us.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are like, "You're very courageous for doing this." It would only require courage if I thought I was going to fail. But here's how my delusional mind works. I don't think I can fail. My past seems to indicate that if I set my sight on something, it can happen. And so I'll give you a perfect example here. I'll try to abstract some of the details because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But one of my team members said, Chris, this is really how we need to build this program, this community. And he's like, the data, let me just read you all the data. And he said, I really respect you that you would do all this work and to tell me the data, but the data doesn't tell the story. This is not what we're going to do. We're going to do it like this. And I could be wrong. And we might not have the kind of success that you're thinking about. Just wait, it'll happen. But to both of our surprise, what I was telling him worked. And he called me up the next day and he said, Chris, I was wrong. You were right. It's not that I didn't believe, but I was just like the data didn't. So, I think this is an analog to many different things, that data is just one piece of information. And depending on what it is that we're looking for, it will tell a very specific story. This is why statisticians lie all the time. Maybe not even on purpose. We all have forms of bias, and we'll read it the way we want to see it. And it's kind of incredible. Like you see, here's a perfect example. Cryptocurrency is taking a dump, right? Yeah, like Bitcoin, all those things are like 50% from its peak. So one person says, reading that exact same data, I knew it. This is all hot air. This is all speculation, and it's all hype. And the other person says, this is wonderful. This is a good opportunity to buy because I missed the first wave, and I'm not going to sleep on this. There's scared money that's running out. The smart money goes in now. Same piece of data, different stories. And there's probably countless ways to read that.
You had mentioned earlier that you embarked on this because you knew or you felt that you couldn't fail. But do you think, and I suspect that maybe you would have done it anyway if you thought it would, because I think part of what people like you and I do is that we're not hampered by the fear of failing.
I have different definitions of failure.
Mm-hmm.
So if I decide, and people will say, "No, Chris, you fail all the time." Like, well, it's because you're looking at it from moment to moment in the short term. I'm just looking at it from the long term. Like, you didn't ask me how long I have to be successful at this. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yes, there's things that we do that don't work. I try another thing. That's not a failure. That was just information on what might not work and what could work potentially. And so, but if I had said at the onset, I don't see myself in this place in the future, then I'm not going to do that. I don't see it being something that compels me to get out of bed every single day to think about this, to obsess over it. Then to me, I'm not going to start that. But once I say, "Yep, I see that. This is what I want." And we had many hard years. Those are not failure. Those was just the beginning of building up what we needed to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, the part is recognizing that, as Thomas Edison said, I forgot the exact quote, but something like, he failed 100 times before he succeeded, or something like that. I don't know what it
I know
was.
exactly what you're talking about, though.
Yeah,
The quote.
yeah.
It's like somebody asked him, like, because it took him 10,000 different tries to find the thing to make the light bulb work, right?
Mm-hmm.
It turned out to be carbonized paper that worked the best. And he goes, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found like 10,000 ways that it didn't work. So he reframed it really fast.
God, it's so amazing. That's just so amazing. I had mentioned earlier that I was going to ask you your thoughts on award shows and competitions and
Hmm.
stuff like that. For no reason other than just to have a discussion. I don't have one way or the other, but just wondering what your thought was.
I think award shows are primarily, we need to see them for what they are, their businesses. And I think somebody along the way said, wouldn't it be great if we got fees for entries and then fees for collecting the prize, and then we could sell tickets to this thing, and then we could publish a book and sell that as well. And so it's become its own business. And I'm not good or bad, because businesses aren't good or
Yeah,
bad;
it's
they
fine.
just
It's
are,
perfectly fine. Hmm.
right? Where it gets bad is where the criteria for which you win an award is motivated by some other thing like nepotism, cronyism, those kinds of
Hmm.
things, and that's not good. It
Hmm.
is also a good for building one's own credibility with an external benchmark, and I think a lot of people do use it for that. The smarter play is to use the awards to thank your clients. So I learned this in a workshop. Is awards are useless except when you buy the award to send to your client to thank them for entrusting you with the creative reins, if you will.
Hmm.
And he said, if you think about it, when the client receives that award, because the award's not for you, it's for them, they feel proud. It reinforces the positive feelings of what has happened. It encourages them to continue to allow you to do your best work. More importantly, when someone walks into their office and sees that, the story begins again. They get to relive the moment again. But then that person leaves the office and says, why aren't I working with a team that can get me this thing?
Hmm.
So before I looked at awards as a purely selfish and kind of like a vanity metric, like I got these awards. Now I look at it like if I'm going to win an award, it's not for me. It could be for the team to thank them for their work, but also more importantly, it's for the client for trusting us to do this work.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. The one thing that I've always wondered about awards is often in focus groups, advertising people are as close as you can be to a used car salesman,
Mm-hmm.
because basically their view of us is that we're just professional liars,
Yeah.
to put it lightly.
Right.
And the only uh, wonderment, not concern, that I've had about award shows is that uh, there's no proof of effectiveness. It's just
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
It would be great if we had an award show that proved, hey, business was here when this was done, and now it's up here.
You might
But
like the Effie Awards.
yeah, no, I know, but I I, like you, don't also want to diminish it, because I do think that it plays a good part in a lot of things, as you pointed out, and
Yeah.
also it's nice to get a pat on the back,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay to be a
Mm-hmm.
business like that. But
Yeah.
so look, I know that we've reached our hour and a half, probably way over time. So I'm going to shoot you some really short ones.
Okay. This is like lightning round.
Lightning round.
All
Okay,
right, I'm limber.
here
I
we go.
survived the hard questions, I think.
It
I
wasn't that
think
hard, was it?
I'm not emotionally traumatized. I think we're good. Yeah.
Well, there's two more that I was going to ask you. One of them is kind of a down. One of them's a
Like,
downer, but
well,
I'm
I
not going
could
to ask
there's
you.
the night's young, Chris. I could still
Yeah, yeah. Don't celebrate too early.
Right. Okay.
So
Sorry.
let's just go on the quick round. So, okay, why bald?
Ready. Why what?
Bald.
Why bald? Hair's thinning. It's a cleaner look.
Okay, I know, but you can pull it off. All right, good. I tried; it didn't work. All
You don't
right.
need to, so you don't.
Oh, I need to, trust me. There's a reason I'm wearing a hat. Are you religious?
I was raised. I'm not.
Yeah, neither am I. Okay. What type of music do you enjoy or default to?
I like when I need to work and think. I need that low fidelity stuff or classical music without lyrics that I can enter into the what do they call the alpha or beta waves or whatever. But when I'm just in a mood, I like fun music. So I'll listen to pop. I'll listen to rap, hip hop. I mean, something that stirs my body. Like you can't help but dance. Anything that does that, I'm good.
Okay. Is there a movie that moved you that you really connected with that you saw? It doesn't even have to be recently.
Yeah, there are plenty of movies. One of my favorite films that if you saw me in the theater, you're like, Chris, pull yourself together, you idiot. Is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's a cartoon. I know.
Seriously?
See, I know. Carlos, I'm gonna just bare my soul here and just no. Here's the thing. There's a moment when Miles Morales is trying to connect with his father and those parental relationships. Pre me having a family didn't hit me at all. And once you have children, because you can be the child in that story and you can also be the father, like what's my relationship with my own children? And there's something there. And like I said, I have a strange connection to comic books. I read the comic book version. It's not the same story, but I bawled as an adult, like just
Wow.
tears, not the whole thing when I read The Death of Spider-Man. It was so
Interesting.
moving to me with
Very
this young
telling.
black man who's Miles Morales, and it was just him understanding the impact that Peter Parker's life had, and just looking at it from that, it's just some of the most brilliant writing. Sarah Pacelli drew the comic book, and it was so perfect. So yeah,
Okay, I wasn't expecting that.
yeah,
Well, I've got several, but I only want to mention one because I'd like for you to consider watching it if you hadn't. And also
okay,
your audience, I think they'll connect with it. It's called Fountainhead.
okay. I've not seen that.
And it's the unofficial story of Frank Lloyd Wright.
Mm,
He's never mentioned by name, and it doesn't isn't promoted as that. It's really more about fighting for what you believe in. It's outstanding. It's in black and white.
mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we're going to end with your typical three truths and one lie.
No, That's another lightning round question.
You're going to have to make it quick.
Okay, Carlos, challenge accepted. Story number one. When I was growing up, we lived next to a creek called Coyote Creek. And both my younger brother and I, who's a year younger, he did not know how to swim. Neither did I. But there was a period in time in which after the rainfall, the water level would rise. But we still go to the creek because we love being at the creek. And he and I were messing around. Something happened. I wasn't paying attention, and he fell into the water. And the current is stronger and higher. And he barely makes it out of the water, and he slips and he falls back in. Now I'm there with my childhood friends, and I don't know what to do. I'm just panic stricken. And I tell my friend who knows how to swim and it's in the Boy Scouts, you got to jump in, you got to get my brother. And he was scared. He's like, I'm not going in there. And he tries to take our fishing pole and cast a line around my brother's foot to pull him in. But, that's a bad idea. So eventually my brother's body drifts into a pool where it's still and it's really deep. And I'm thinking to myself, I cannot come home without my brother alive. And this may be the last of me too. So I go into the water. I start bouncing up and down, as the water is getting higher and higher, and it's right by my ear. And I could see his foot in this very murky pool. And I just take a breath. I go under, I grab his foot, and I'm thinking like I have to build enough momentum going back towards shore. Otherwise, we're both done for. So I'm hopping, still underwater, hopping. And eventually I get enough above. I pull my brother's body out. He is white as a ghost. His lips are purple. And I then turn to my friend again, like, dude, do CPR. You know this stuff. You're in the Cub Scouts. He's like, I'm not doing that. My brother looked dead.
Wow.
And so I'm like, you know what? What do they remember? What do you remember in school? What do you remember in school? So I first clear the airway. Like I look in his mouth. There's nothing in there. You pump the stomach, and then I start doing CPR on him. Push on the stomach, and he's stiff. He's just there, and I'm doing it, and like I can feel the tears, but I'm like, you know what? Don't give up. Keep doing this. And then all of a sudden, he turns aside and he coughs one big cough, and everything that he drank came out. Things that were in the water, all kinds of horrific things. He just vomited it all out, and he's like all bleary eyed, just blinking, like, what is going on? Look, oh my God, we have to get you home. That's story number one.
How old were you?
I was not yet in junior high, so I don't know. I'm going to guess 12, but I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, we got to do a lot of silly things as kids. Story number two. My first girlfriend had a stranglehold on me emotionally. And I'm 16 years old. I love her to death. I think I'm going to marry her. And she was very particular about Valentine's Day, all our anniversaries and all that kind of stuff. And, me being a teenage boy, I'm like, oh, I don't really remember this. And she cited that as one of the reasons why we broke up. She's like, these little things matter to me. So later on in life, I meet my wife, who is my girlfriend, my best friend from school. And I ask her, like, what is important to you? What are the dates? And I write these things down. And we've been married for 24 years. I've never missed a single anniversary because I think that pain of losing my first love, that this was going to come back and haunt me. So to this date, I've never missed an important anniversary with my wife. Story number three. I had applied to go to Art Center, and I had asked for a scholarship consideration, and they had sent me the portfolio back. And then they called me and said, you know what? Congratulations, you got in school, but we realized we sent your portfolio back before reviewing it. And the period in which to review it, it's tomorrow. I need you to go and FedEx your portfolio now to be considered for a scholarship. And so I go to my mom, I need to send this via FedEx. Can you take care of this? And she goes, no problem. Here's the address. You got to do it now. It's got to be tomorrow. She goes, okay, no problem. My mom comes back. Everything's cool. They call me the next day. They're like, we did not get your portfolio. I'm like, what do you mean? Can you check? And she goes, you know what? If it doesn't get here the next day, this is done. I go over to my mom, like, Mom, did you send this through FedEx? She goes, no, I sent it to UPS. It was just 2 day. What's the difference? I'm like, oh, I just can't believe it. I did get accepted. I did get a scholarship, but not because I didn't try. All right.
You're making
Story
it
number
hard on me.
4. What's that?
You're making it hard on me. I believe
Well, you
everything
still
you've
have one
said so
story left.
far.
Yes. So maybe you'll reconsider how many things I tell true and how much of a liar I am. Last one. I'm traveling with my girlfriend later on to be my wife. I'm visiting her family in Taiwan. We're not married yet, but I was given a script to read as a last minute project before I got on the plane. And I'm reading through the script on the plane. I'm like, oh, this is so hard to follow. What's going on? We land, I'm jet lagged, whatever. And then I read it and I get a call from the producer who sent me the script. He says, we need you to work on this project. Can you come back? I'm like, cool. I think I can do this. So I tell my girlfriend, soon to be my wife, I got to go back. It's a film title. It looks really intriguing. And she goes, okay, well, let's figure it out. We can just go back. I said, no, you stay. I'll go back. I'll do the work. And luckily, the producer called me and said, Chris, it's not a go. And you won't believe it, but the script was for The Matrix Part 1. What I wouldn't have done to have gotten an opportunity, not even to get it, but to work on that, because it's one of my favorite films of all time. You've now been presented 3 truths and 1 lie, Carlos.
Oh, God.
Story number 1 was about my younger brother who drowned and was resurrected from the creek. Story number 2 was my first love. Having cited the reason why she broke up with me is because I missed an anniversary and didn't pay enough attention to the details. So to this day, to protect myself, I don't miss any important dates with my wife. Number 3 is Art Center accepting me, but saying the portfolio's late and my mom sending it like UPS second day. The last one was me being in Taiwan, getting a script before I left, and then later on discovering that it was for The Matrix because I couldn't understand the film. But I never got a chance to work on it because it got killed before I flew back. Which one is the lie? All stories are true except for one.
I'm unfortunately talking to a guy who has a way with words. And they're all quite believable. But I'm going to say that number 4 is a lie.
What makes you think that's a lie?
I think it's a lie because if your mother agreed to do it, I don't know that she would have not asked when is it supposed to be there.
It's a very
That
good
said,
guess.
though, hold on. I totally understand why she wouldn't do it because I suspect my wife would have done the same thing.
We
But
need
I'm
to
still going to call
reassess
it a
our
lie.
relationships. What's that?
I'm still going to call it a lie.
Still going to call it a lie, even though it's very believable that someone
It is,
close
but
to you
all
will
your
do it to
stories
you.
are believable.
Now, I will say this. That's a very good guess. My mom is notorious, and so is my wife, for not listening to the details of what is necessary and just thinking, you want Star Wars? Star Trek will just do just fine.
Exactly.
You don't understand. No,
Right.
it's very specific. I FedEx I message my wife, I need you to do this. And she comes home with some other, I'm like, literally, like, it says this. How could you? Whatever. That is a true story, though. I almost lost out on a scholarship because my mom wasn't paying attention and thought, second day is just good as first and it's half the cost. What's the difference? What
That's
will
the
one day
reason
make?
why my wife would have sent it second day.
100%. It's just the frugal Asian immigrant who's like, no, this is not necessary. There you go. But
Yeah,
that
I
story
made
is
the
true.
wrong call as I was saying it. I see that
You
now.
should have read my reaction and changed your answer
I saw that
when
now.
I said
I
a
saw
good
that.
guess. But you're an honorable man. You stayed with your initial.
That's right.
You
I
stayed
will
with your
fight till
initial
the end,
guess.
even if I'm wrong.
Because you know why? Because you got to get a pair and you're not
Exactly.
sorry.
Exactly. So good.
Okay,
Not sorry. Exactly.
here we go. Not sorry. The story that is not true is story number 2. I did not screw up on any anniversaries with my first girlfriend. We broke up for other reasons. And to this day, I miss all of our anniversaries because my wife doesn't care about them at all.
You're
She's
not going
not
to believe
sentimental.
this, but that was my first choice, really.
I don't believe it, Carlos. You're right. Yes, you're right when you said I'm not going to believe it.
Well, as I said,
You should have said I'm between these two, and you should have read my reaction, as a poker player might.
I mean, if I was playing poker, I would have lost my ass today.
I guess you. You're like, I go all in. It's a bluff. I'm like 4 aces.
Exactly. Yeah. Chris, thank you so much. It was very enlightening, and I hope we do this again.
I want to thank you for having this conversation with me and for being so generous with your questions and your time. And it just, even though I did most of the talking, I get a glimpse into how your brain works. And to me,
By
that's
the
a treat.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a pleasure. It really was.